I've just got some burning thoughts in my head that I need to get out on my long drive because I just want these thoughts out of my head before the weekend starts. 3 things. The housing market right now. I've just come from spending a few hours with an estate agent in southwest London, and I want to share what's going on in the house market and the flat market because I think it's important. Secondly, we've got a budget coming up, a budget speech coming up on Wednesday next week, the 26th of March, which is 5 days before the budget measures from the previous autumn budget even come into effect on the 1st of April, along with stamp duty and employers' national insurance tax increases and a lot of other tax increases, and a rise in the minimum wage. And the third thing I want to talk about is how we have rising poverty, severely rising poverty in the UK. And there was that very heated debate between Gary Stevenson and Daniel Priestley on the Diary of a CEO podcast yesterday, which is excellent. I recommend anyone to watch it. But it's really crystallized something, because what the Chancellor wants and what Gary Stevenson wants and what businesses want and what we all want is growth to reduce poverty, and that is done by increasing wages, not by increasing taxes on anybody. There might be other reasons to tax wealth, and I'm not opposed to a wealth tax, but to say that a wealth tax will solve the poverty problem is plainly wrong. Anyway, those are the 3 things. So, number 1, and then I'll come on to number 2, and then I'll come on to number 3. Number 1, the market. So I'm working with an agent that approached me and said, Charlie, we hear your thesis about don't overvalue, price correctly, sell quickly. But it's really hard because we're up against Foxtons and Dexters and other overvaluing agents, and unless we go in there and overvalue, we just don't win the business. How can we fix that? And I have already fixed that problem for them in a very short space of time. They are now winning instructions around about an average of £1 million each without giving any valuation. And they've asked me, and they have hired me, they have retained me to advise them and help them, and I'm doing that with their whole business, and it's going very well, which is why I can't mention who they are yet, because they're actually a little bit overwhelmed at the moment. But I'm talking to them a lot and seeing them about once a week. And the feedback from all the buyers, so that they've had a record number of new buyers registering with them in March on the back of the new listings that they've brought to market at sensible market prices. And they had one, it was a roughly £1.3 million instruction. They had over 30 viewings on it in 3 weeks and 7 offers. Now that's the house market. They've also got some flats on their books, and the flats, even the really well-priced flats, just tumbleweed, barely any viewings, to the point where this agent is saying, I'm not even sure we want to take on any more flats. The flat market is just dead. It's in their local area, which is a suburb of southwest London. It's outside central London. But there were buyers already commenting on the fact that, oh, well, there's a budget next week, we're not sure. And also sellers going, oh, we're going to wait and see what happens in the budget speech next week before we make any big decisions. And this is quite typical and quite normal when there are big announcements coming. But just today in the news, it's been announced that the OBR has halved the growth forecast for the UK this year. That is devastatingly bad news for everybody, especially the Chancellor and the government and the economy and poverty and wages. and everything. But back to the market for a second. So the other thing being discussed between buyers and sellers and agents at the moment is, oh well, the stamp duty deadline is looming in 10 days from now. What's going to happen after that? What's going to happen after that is it's going to cost more to buy a house. A lot more, significantly more, for almost everybody. Excludes first-time buyers under 300,000. But other than that, if it's a property above £125,000, you're going to be paying more stamp duty on now than you were. So that's not going to help the market, is it? It's going to do two things. It's going to dampen demand. It's also going to dampen sellers choosing to sell up, because now if they want to sell to move, their stamp duty cost is going to be higher. So it's just going to kill market activity, I think. And I think rather than a spring bounce in Q2 of 2025, as a direct result of stamp duty costs going up on the 1st of April, we're going to see a spring splat in activity. And that's just on the back of the stamp duty change. Now, leaving that to one side, we've then got the fact that the Chancellor is mooted to be announcing major cuts to public services, austerity type cuts. The kind of things Tories are famous for doing. The nasty party. And they've exceeded their borrowing limits, so Rachel Reeves has created her own £20 billion black hole. That's how far over spending budget she's gone. Her fiscal headroom is gone. Keir Starmer refused to rule out increasing income tax. So we are facing, as a population, the perfect storm of flatlining growth and rising taxes, both of which are going to make poverty worse. So I don't know what to expect in the Chancellor's budget speech, her spring statement next Wednesday. I don't know. I have no expectations. I just have a really deep sinking feeling about it. And the deep sinking feeling comes from the fact that everyone is getting poorer. GDP per head is going down, constantly and consistently going down, and it has been for a couple of years. So as individuals, we are getting poorer and poorer and poorer every single month as a whole, despite the wage increases, because the wage increases are not enough to keep up with the rising costs of actual living. So we already have painfully high poverty levels, both for adults and kids. We have record homelessness and temporary accommodation. And this is all set to get worse. Now, this brings me on to point number 3. So point number 1 was agents in the market and what the market's looking like. Point number 2 is the budget, what's worrying about the budget, and that the budget, I think, is going to be making austerity and poverty worse. Point number 3, Gary Stevenson, in his debate with Dan Priestley on Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, Gary is just saying tax the rich, tax the rich. I share Gary's passion for avoiding poverty, reducing poverty. I share his view that this poverty has been partly caused by income inequality and wealth inequality. But almost everything he says just feels like divisiveness and blame the rich, therefore tax the rich. And it's causing a lot of people who are experiencing hardship to go, yeah, and they're cheering him on and going, yay, Gary, but no one's actually going, let's look at the numbers. Do the numbers support this idea? And again, I'm not against wealth tax per se. What I am against is the idea that a wealth tax solves poverty. It absolutely doesn't. It might help in other ways, but taxing the rich is one of those things that just like, it's that thing that when you're suffering and you see other people doing well, you just want them to not do well, even if it doesn't help you. That is a known human trait, and that's all this is. And there are cynics who are saying that Gary is just getting book sales on the back of this divisiveness and populist approach of, it's all the rich's fault, tax the rich. It is not the fault of the rich. If the rich are accumulating assets faster than everyone else, which they are, that is the fault of government policy. And there definitely need to be changes to the tax system to help alleviate the way the playing field is tilted and all the wealth is sliding into the wealthiest. So I agree with him that something needs to be done in order to reduce the wealth inequality. I agree with him completely on that. I agree that we shouldn't tax work. I think that taxing work, income tax or tax on jobs of any kind, actually hurts growth, hurts prosperity, and hurts attempts to bring people out of poverty. And Gary agrees on that. He said the same, and I agree with him on that. So, on all of that we agree. Taxing a wealth tax of 1% of everything above 10 million. It's not 1% of the whole 10 million. So if you had 11 million, you'd be paying 1% on 1 million of that, right? Which is $1,000. It's not much. Sorry, 10 grand, not a grand, 10 grand. So someone worth 11 million would only pay 10 grand as a wealth tax. And I don't think anyone worth 11 million is going to actually object to that. I don't object to that. Will it make a difference to all the people going, hey, tax the rich, tax the rich? No, it's not going to help them at all. It's not going to make any noticeable difference to those people who are struggling. And that's why there is some credibility to people's cynicism that this is Gary getting publicity on the back of a popular concept of, yes, blame the rich, tax the rich. What I thought was most interesting about his debate on that podcast was one point when Gary said, right, we're all rich, we're all worth over 10 million quid, and I think you can check it out. He is actually worth a lot of money. But the difference is that Dan Priestley and Stephen Bartlett both made their millions by starting up companies, employing people, and selling goods and services to people that wanted them. So they have created prosperity on an ongoing basis. They've created operations that create employment, generate income tax, generate VAT, all those things. Gary's wealth was created with no risk and with a small amount of risk to his own money, and didn't create any employment, didn't create any prosperity. Now, that's fine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. He's a trader. That's what traders do. But I've known a lot of traders in my life because I was in the city. I was in the city for a few years. I have a lot of friends in the city, and they're traders. And I've heard them all say that there is something particularly unfulfilling and unrewarding about making your living from moving money on a computer screen, sitting at a desk at a computer screen, clicking stuff. Like, you turn up, you sit down at your desk, click, 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 a couple of phone calls, click, 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 go home. You haven't created anything. You haven't helped anybody. As in, you haven't helped anybody who's in need of help. You're just speculating. Okay? Now, I would support a much bigger tax on that sort of wealth creation, because that is parasitic wealth creation, where if you make money as a trader, someone has lost on the other side. So it is a zero-sum way of making wealth. Which is probably a bit why Gary feels, I don't know how he feels about it, but he doesn't seem to be particularly proud of it. So if taxing the rich doesn't end poverty, what does? Well, history shows us that there's only ever been one thing that lifts people out of poverty, and that is work, wages, jobs. Okay, where do most jobs come from? Forgive me if I get this number wrong, but off the top of my head, I think 80% of jobs are from the private sector, and 20% are from the public sector, roughly. I could be a bit wrong about that, but the vast majority of jobs are in the private sector. Therefore, if you agree, I don't know if you do, that the only way to lift people out of poverty in a sustainable way is with more work, more jobs, then the conditions for people who create jobs, don't forget, every single private employment company was started up by someone, right? The conditions for job creation should be improved. That's the only way to lift people out of poverty. You use tax to incentivize employment, and you reduce tax on the lowest income. So you raise the tax threshold from 12,000 to say 15,000 or even more. And the other excessive taxes on lower income people are things like fuel duty, because everyone pays the same price for a litre of petrol or diesel, no matter how rich or poor they are. So the poorer you are, the bigger the impact on your disposable income, or lack of it, from things like fuel duty. And if you are on a very low income but you have to drive to work and back, or if you're running a small business as a one-man band, maybe you're a plumber or a carpenter or an electrician or some other kind of tradesperson, and you're having to fill your van with diesel every day, the impact excuse me, the impact on you or your business is much, much bigger than it is on bigger companies and wealthier people. Therefore, scrapping fuel duty, which is a tax, would disproportionately benefit the poorest individuals and the smallest businesses. Right? They could scrap petrol duty tomorrow if they so chose. On Wednesday, Rachel Reeves could announce there's no point cutting 1p here or 5p there. That just doesn't really touch the sides in terms of a crisis of poverty, the scale of which we're in. You need to slash it, maybe not 100%, but you need to substantially reduce fuel duty, and that has an immediate effect tomorrow on the bank balances of everybody who's most affected by them. One of the things that would do is a lot of small businesses would then be more likely to be able to afford to hire people. So you would get an immediate and direct benefit on employment and therefore growth. So the answer to reducing poverty is to stimulate employment. Stimulate employment and reduce the indirect and stealth taxes on the poorest. So I would scrap the green levy, which has currently cost so far £3,600 per household as a levy, as an excess, as a green tax on our home energy bills, right? And it hasn't yet yielded anything. And for those people who are worried about, well, what about net zero? If we're all skint and poor and living in homes we can't heat, even if the UK achieves net zero, it doesn't move the needle globally at all. Not to miss the point also that so far, most of the net zero policies are simply exporting our carbon emissions to other countries. In other words, we're not actually reducing it. We might do on paper UK's carbon emissions, but we've only achieved that by exporting them. And household heating is one of the worst costs for people really suffering in poverty. It increases illness, it increases, therefore, the burden on the NHS. These are the things the government could and should be doing to alleviate poverty and stimulate growth. All right? Anyway, just a ramble, want to get out of my head. Have a lovely weekend. See you soon, guys. And let me know, I would genuinely love to hear any constructive thoughts. I don't really care who is saying what. I only care if what someone is saying is true. So I'm not interested in toing and froing about someone's motives, that kind of stuff, unless they are deceptive, in which case that is worth knowing about. Anyway, bye guys, see you soon. Have a good weekend, bye.